My name's Chris, and this is has been my watch list for the past week or so. Some interesting movies, some recommended by yourselves in the comments, and some that have just dropped in through the door or otherwise. And we're going to start with one that was a product of, well, watching a YouTube video more so than anything else. Elliot Cohen did a watch along for Eraserhead by David Lynch, and his video's linked somewhere there. I'm sure you've probably seen it, but I hadn't seen Eraserhead beforehand. In fact, I think Twin Peaks and Mulholland Drive are the only two that live in the memory for me of David Lynch. I've seen Mulholland Drive a couple of times. I've seen Twin Peaks a couple of times, although I haven't seen any of the new stuff, so reminds me I need to get on. So I hadn't seen Eraserhead, and I thought I would give it a watch because then I can enjoy Elliot's video a bit more, is what I thought. So I watched it for the first time, and I don't know if you're anything like me. Aside from the very obvious themes that are in Lynch's movies and in Eraserhead, I'm not sure what the hell they're about. I've got to be honest, I'd be brave enough to say. I've read some of other people's commentary in the film and what they think some of it's about, and then obviously I've heard what Elliot had to say, and they could all be right. But the one thing I'll say about David Lynch films is that they're the kind of films you can't take your eye off. The imagery and the detail and all the little things that he puts into his films mean that there's always something to see, and there's always something really interesting. And I absolutely loved Eraserhead. It's something that I could relate to. That kind of parenting, small, I can't do anything with my life part, where you're just tied to this baby or this child, and that lots of scenes from the frustration to the walking out the door and the baby start to cry every time you leave it, etc. They are all there, and we're very thought-provoking in mind. And then the other imagery that goes along with it, and the characters, etc. go on. It did strike me, even though we've got Twin Peaks, Mulholland Drive, and this, that it kind of makes the same movie in some ways every time. They all have very similar ideas and how he frames and lays things out and stages them, that make it a fascinating watch, and I really adored it. And I also know that it's the type of movie, if I'd have seen 20 years ago as a young man, I hated it. I don't want to, like, honestly, some of the imagery just would have seemed like out of place. It's a bit, as Elliot says, it's a bit body horror-ish. I would have thought some of the props were put in there just to cause you to recoil a bit, and certainly they are, because that uneasy atmosphere is very aware the whole way through it. You know, he creates that sense of unease through his filmmaking, and especially through the sound. So the use of sound that's within that film, both from the overtones of space, that space sound that he has, and even the speech. You know, I often wonder, there's a scene where he's meeting the neighbour and she's speaking, and it's nearly like her voice is in a vacuum, so to speak, so everything else stripped out around it, and you only have that one thing to focus on. And the sound, it doesn't appear natural, it appears forced. Like, that happens a lot in Twin Peaks, for instance, so you might know what I'm talking about. So that was the first one. The next one were recommendations from one of the viewers since then, who asked for my opinion on two movies. One was Born Afire, and the other was Spring Night, Summer Night, both Indicator releases. And that was all the reason that I had to kind of say, right, which of the Indicator releases will I pick out and watch, and what's next. And I'll start with Born Afire, because I put an Instagram post up and basically said this film was bananas. And it definitely is bananas. It's a surrealist film. It tells a story of a man who plays the flute, and he starts to hear noises and these audio illusions or hallucinations, so to say, that are interfering with him. And there's a woman comes to the scene, she can hear it as well, and it turns out his father went on a pilgrimage of some sorts many years ago, and he went missing and died, and he played the flute, and it's all very surreal. And I have to say, when I was watching the movie, it was about half an hour in, and there was a set, or there was a building that was in the film, and I just couldn't help but thinking, that this film felt so contrived and so made up and so surreal that I think the whole film was based around the fact that they found this set and thought, right, we're going to write the film around this building or the set of it. And it turns out that's kind of what happened, because I mean there's any amount of weird things in this movie, and I'm not saying that I really disliked it either, because in the same way as David Lynch, the imagery etc. can all be interesting. It just, I honestly think if the main character had been cast differently, and I don't mean that he's a bad actor because I think he acted it well, but he seemed very out of place with the story that was being told, if you know what I mean. He was very much this white man, bald and kind of furrish, nearly gingerish hair on top, and then he's in the setting that's Turkey, Middle East-ish. It just didn't seem to gel quite right. His father, who appeared in it, actually seemed to fit better in the scheme of things, and there is an evolving story to tell about what happened to his father and why he's getting these visions, etc. And it is based around basically a battle with the devil. I mean, you're getting the idea. It's weird. I'm not saying I didn't like it, but I didn't love it either. Let's put it that way. Definitely bears rewatching, and yeah, I just don't know. I just don't know about Bonfire. It's an interesting watch. Like all the indicator titles are, there was interest to be had in it. The other one was Spring Night, Summer Night, which was, it's a film by Joseph Anderson, but it was restored by Nicholas Winding Refn recently, and it was streamed online for a while. And it's a film from the mid-60s, I believe, that's set in, yes, it is mid-60s. The set is in Midwest America, basically in a small town called Cannon, I think it is, in Ohio. And it tells the story of a brother and a sister, or brother and stepsister. That's kind of one of the themes that go through it, because they have an inappropriate relationship, and inappropriate things become of that relationship. And the film kind of tells the story of their relationship and then of the town around them that goes. So I would say the first 20 minutes of it are really interesting. It's a monochrome film, and for a film that had essentially no budget whatsoever, like none, they basically spent all their budget on film stock by all accounts and used unknown actors or just people, and it was very much a film school project. It's an absolutely gorgeous looking movie. I was watching it thinking to myself, I cannot think of another movie that I've seen in recent memory that is as good looking a monochrome film as this. Maybe not since seen the 4K restoration of La Dolce Vita earlier on this year, which does feel like about 4 years ago. But that was the kind of other monochrome film that I watched and went, wow, this looks really stunning. The first 20 minutes are shot in like almost like a documentary style, where the action or the characters are kind of happening slightly off center of camera. So the focus might be on a door, and the people might be having a conversation in the foreground, and you're certainly listening along, but it's kind of following the door, and people come in and out of the door, and then it shifts to follow them for a second, and then back to the door. Same with the bar. So when they go into the bar, they kind of show like a documentary thing of looking at the people talking, not necessarily at what they're talking about, but how they're getting along with each other in the atmosphere. And it's very much sets the tone of what kind of little town this was. And then it goes into the value of the relationship. So the relationship between the mother and the father gets investigated. The relationship between the brother and the sister or the stepsister gets investigated. And then their relationship with other people around. And I have to say, I really, really enjoyed Spring Night, Summer Night. I think I rated it 4 stars out of 5, and I think that's about right, because the real value of the film, I think, is the fact that it has difficult subject material, but it never judges. It never preaches to you as the viewer whether anything was right or wrong. It just presents as is, and if anything, it lets you have some sort of sympathy for some of the characters and some of the internal battles, because I don't think they ever really resolve what way they feel about everything either. It's very much, this is an exploration into the characters and situations that they find themselves in. So that was Spring Night, Summer Night, and thanks for those recommendations, because I definitely wouldn't have seen that for some period of time until I got to the end. Then the last two are both BFI releases. One was a recent release with Toshio Matsumoto's Funeral Parade of Roses. I'm going to do a separate video about this and another movie that I have sitting beside me. But Funeral Parade of Roses was terrific. Absolutely terrific. I had heard that a lot of people said it was a great release and a great movie to watch. And especially, it's another one that's set kind of half documentary, or shot as half documentary, half as dramatic film. But it tells the story of transsexuals in Japan in the mid-60s. And tells the story of Eri, who works as a hostess in Japanese bars, and it's basically a gay bar of some sort. But it has very clear overtones to another much more recent Asian film. If you have watched it, if you've watched it, you'll know which one I'm talking about. But that's all the illusion that they need. That when you get to the end of that movie, you'll go, oh, that kind of played out a bit like in some movie. But if I tell you what movie it is, it'll give too much away. But you can stick down in the comments if you know what I'm talking about. But Funeral Parade of Roses, separate video, fantastic though, and fantastic release, like that one. And then the other one was The Battle of Sexes by Peter Sellers, or with Peter Sellers, should I say, because it's a Charles Crichton movie. And I have to say, I really do like, I mean, BFI did this a while ago, but the fact they moved to Scanova cases, these feel much more premium or otherwise. Battle of Sexes, I have to say, for the first half, had me in stitches a lot of the time. Peter Sellers was hilarious in this, and it tells the story of, well, an American lady who goes from America to England, nothing new premise there, where she meets on the train a Scottish man who makes tartan, and makes tartan materials in Scotland, and she decides to come along and show him how to make a more efficient business. But the business is run by Martin on a day-to-day basis. Martin's acted by Peter Sellers, and he doesn't like the changes that have been made, and the business itself is made up of a lot of older men, and then subsequently old couples who make the tartan dotted all over all over Scotland for them. And it shows basically the Battle of Sexes is him fighting against the female as to who's going to win. He wants rid of her. She doesn't have anything against, she quite likes Martin actually as it goes. She just wants the business to be better, but she's trying to modernise it. And it's this push against modernising the business and tartan, and to move it towards synthetic fibre and away from tartan, because that's labour intensive and all that kind of stuff. And Martin, who's a very traditionalist, wants the business to stay the same. He really believes in it. And the first half of it was, like I say, hilarious. With myself and the wife, laughed out loud at numerous points at it, as Peter Sellers is just brilliant. And the second half goes a bit more surreal, I think, as to how it resolved. But if you think of it very much, it doesn't film it or present itself as slapstick very much, but I think it's very much in that tone. And with that, yeah, I really enjoyed Battle of the Sexes as well. So that's mainly what I've been watching for the past week and a half. There are a few other bits and bobs. I started the Coker trilogy, but I would like to get 2 films into that before I really give you my thoughts. Also on the plan for this week are some Arrow Academy releases that'll be getting behind. Tree of Wooden Clogs is sitting on my watch pile at the moment, and I'm gonna try and catch up on the new release of After Midnight as well. It should be dropping through my door at any minute. So if you have been watching, thank you very much. Give it a like, give us a comment, let me know what you've been watching, or if you've seen any of the films that I've talked about here today. But aside from that, thanks very much for taking the time to watch. Take care, stay safe, speak to you soon. All the best, bye.